This is the new Triumph Scrambler 400XC. Looks pretty sweet in yellow, doesn't it? Triumph came correct to the beginner bike segment in 2024 with their Street and Scrambler 400 models, selling tens of thousands of units in a short time since their release. But by comparison, the Scrambler 400XC looks like more of that off-road ready counterpart. But obviously it begs the question, is this bike just a styling exercise, or does it have the chops to back up its rugged aesthetic? I'm gonna get this bike out on the road, dabble a little bit off-road before bringing it back to the studio for an in-depth overview. We're gonna determine if this bike is the new de facto entry-level scrambler for a burgeoning off-road boy on a budget. We got this bike on loan from AF1 here in Austin. If you're a Euro boy in the market for a new ride or already have a bike in need of parts or service, check them out via the link in the description down below. All right, enough yapping, let's swing a leg and go for a ride.
Scrambler 400XE, Triumph's little baby scrambler. Man, this styling for a long time was locked away in some more expensive machines, and I've been saying this since I reviewed the Speed 400 back in 2024. This is a very nice looking bike, man. It's well executed. I think it's a fun magic trick they play by having, you know, some cool Triumph build quality and yet meeting a nice price point. This TR series 400cc motor, liquid cooled with the thing tucked away just like the other one. Got some cool rally looks, you know. I've been getting a lot of double takes while I'm on this machine. It's pretty nice. Swinging a leg, we have a 32.8-inch seat height. As you guys can see on the 360, I am 5'11" with a 32-inch inseam. I can pretty comfortably flat foot this machine. 410 pounds, wet and ready to ride. I would have liked to have seen something a little bit lighter weight, but this works pretty good. We have a nice little USB outlet right there too. Ready for adventure, right? Nice sweeping speedometer. Our rev counter is a bit small here in the middle. This is exactly the same switchgear as you get on the other 400 models. Nothing different. You do get this nice little Huffy Bike impact cushion right here. Let's fire her up, shall we? Snick it up into neutral. Pretty nice gearbox. Nice little thump of the motor here. Little brap brap from the single cylinder. Now we do have to do a couple things here because this is a off-roady sort of bike. We're going to turn off traction control. We press and hold the switch here until it does something. Let's take a look. I believe that's off now. Going into off-road mode, get our rear ABS off as well. And I think we're ready and set to go on the little Triumph. Let's pull away here. Clutch engagement's a little further off the lever. Adjustable clutch and brake over here. Let's check to see if our ABS is off. Oh yeah, we can slip and slide the little Triumph a little bit. It's got a really generous lock-to-lock and slow speeds. You guys can see here it's got these cutoffs in the tank, so you can really go quite a ways lock-to-lock. Turn this thing on a dime like you would a Vespa or something like that. Look at that. Nice and easy on the Triumph. And with these nice upright bars too, you have a really great amount of leverage to be able to dip the bike into corners and all of that. So slow speeds, it's pretty nice. The first thing I'm noticing is the fueling is improved over that first generation Speed 400 that I tested. I think that they've made a couple changes to this new Scrambler model, and I'm really enjoying the fueling. Typically that's one of the nicest things the Triumphs have, is that on-off throttle, that linear progressive feel from the tube. And the Speed 400 actually felt, it was super lean. It was really lean and kind of choppy, but this one feels really nice. I think they did an update on this new model because it feels perfect to me. The single cylinder is nice and punchy, as you would expect from one little piston moving up and down. It feels very KTM-like, you know? It doesn't rev out super high. I think a little over 10 grand is our final rev ceiling on this. But you guys can see there, it has a nice bark on the downshifts. No quick shifter up and down on this model. I assume you could fit one if you wanted to be crazy and do a quick shifter. No auto blip as well because this is not equipped from the factory. But you guys see here, we'll go down. Let's pop it down in a second. Yeah, it's nice. This is the sort of motor that you don't really want to rev out too much, and it's nice that you have a nice surge of torque down low, because revving this out, it gets very buzzy and very cantankerous pretty quickly. And I've noticed that riding this motorcycle at highway speeds, the bike tends to get pretty out of sorts. The mirrors start to really vibrate a lot, it really loves being in this kind of mid-range right here. And it's pretty playful doing it too. We have a 19 up front and an 18 out back with an 80 aspect ratio. So you got a big meaty rear tire on this thing, which is kind of funny. And that's trying to split the difference between something that is very off-road focused and something that is completely street biased, right? On typical adventure bikes in the new entry-level adventure category, you'll see machines that have, you know, a 21 up front and a 17 out back, or an 18 out back. And on street models, you'll see 17s front and back. So this is kind of splitting the difference with a slightly knobbier look to the tire. Oftentimes with this style of bike that's kind of trying to do both things, right, it tends to not do either one particularly well. However, this motorcycle is a pretty competent little street bike. And I think one of the main reasons for that is that it started out life as a completely street biased motorcycle. So it actually reminds me a lot of my Ducati Scrambler Desert Sled, right? It's a motorcycle that has been slightly modified to do a little bit more off-road riding. Now, where this motorcycle is falling apart a little bit for me is the suspension settings. We don't have adjustable suspension on this machine, and so we kind of have to work with what we've got, except for the preload out back. But the front end, it's very pogo-y. I think the rebound is just a little too fast and a little too aggressive, and 150 millimeters of suspension travel is just not quite enough to soak up some bigger hits and bigger bumps. And so even riding on road, as I've been doing today, on potholes and some uneven surfaces, the bike really does get out of shape really quickly. It seems to have a pretty low ceiling of performance when it comes to rougher terrain, which is the opposite of what you'd want in a Scrambler style bike. You'd want something that is going to be compliant, a little bit softer. And I've noticed even on road, it kind of just goes down the road in a choppy kind of way. So if I were to own this bike, I would maybe look into dropping in something into these fork tubes to give me a little bit more control and flexibility. I cannot remember off the top of my head the size of the fork tubes here, but I guarantee you can pop these out, put something a little bit more controlled, and you know, give you a little bit more control when riding this motorcycle off-road and even on-road. Braking components are functional. We don't have extreme stopping power. We have a very simple little square master cylinder here, pinching a single Barbie brake caliper down there on a single disc. And so you get nice bite, but then there's basically no more brakes. So you got to think ahead a little bit to say, okay, like if I do need to ask for more brakes, I'm not really going to get it. Like if I go for that initial grab of lever, it's like a fixed point. You grab it, it's stuck, and then that's your sort of maximum brakes. And it's kind of funny, but that's just what you get with sort of cheaper braking hardware. But overall, like, you sit on this motorcycle and you got a really kind of more upmarket feeling than you would get from anything else in this price category. And a lot of those kind of adventure capable little entry-level bikes, they sit at the same price point, but they don't offer the same sort of cool factor that this thing has. Again, I've seen a lot of people double taking on this motorcycle today, and it kind of fits that Royal Enfield effect, where as long as you have a splashy paint scheme, a single round headlight, you know, people tend to vibe with the bike. People think it's kind of cool. People ask if it's retro or whatever, and you know, as a styling exercise, I think Triumph totally nailed this motorcycle. This bike has so much curb appeal for the price, and that alone is reason to buy it. However, the riding experience is like a 6 out of 10 for me. This is a bit choppy in places and not quite as pulled together as I would like from a motorcycle in this price category. We've gotten to the point where beginner bikes in that $6,000-$7,000 price break, they're really good nowadays. There's really nothing they don't do correctly. And you know, I think about something like the Royal Enfield Himalayan, the new 450 with the Sherpa motor. Maybe doesn't have quite the curb appeal of this motorcycle, but vastly more capable on-road and off-road. It just has that final bit of polish and edge that a adventure-capable bike like this should have. The other thing about this motorcycle is it's not happy doing highway speeds. You pump, you know, 70, 80 miles an hour on this thing, you're getting vibes in the handlebar. That single cylinder is getting really stressed out. It's pretty buzzy. The gearbox is pretty short, right? It's really tightly spaced, which is super fun for roads like this where, you know, you can go between second to sixth gear. You're changing gears all the time on this thing. It's super engaging and fun to use, but on the highway, if you're going to be doing any type of long distance on this, it's a pretty punishing experience. It's very buzzy, very vibrational, and you kind of want to keep it to about 60 miles an hour, which in a funny way is not too dissimilar from what I used to do with my Ducati Scrambler desert sled. I'd keep it to about like 75 miles an hour, and it was perfectly happy. So this kind of functions in a similar way. Flat out, got adequate acceleration, and for the beginner rider, I think it's completely perfect, right? It's in that A2 compliant power level. The torque is totally manageable. This is extremely appropriate for a beginner. And something kind of interesting is happening with this motorcycle for me. The Speed 400 was a motorcycle that felt kind of like 3/4 sized, right? And so you jump on this and it feels like a full-sized motorcycle, right? But it feels like a full-size street bike. It doesn't feel like a full-size Scrambler, because you ride the Triumph 1200 Scramblers or even like the Ducati Scramblers. Yes, they're multi-cylinder. Yes, they're obviously much more expensive. But I think this is kind of cool because it's not quite as intimidating for someone who'd want to ride this style of bike. A Triumph 1200 Scrambler is a very large motorcycle. It's super tall, very commanding, very heavy, and you know, those types of bikes, you definitely need to be more experienced to ride them. Whereas this, you know, at 410 pounds, wet and ready to ride, it's basically as heavy as other beginner bikes, maybe a little bit more. Again, I would have liked to have seen it a little bit lighter. A 32.8-inch seat height, again, a teensy bit taller than some of the other stuff. So you get the feeling that you're riding this big bike, but it's actually beginner appropriate, which is really cool, you know, as opposed to, you know, if you were to jump on a actual Scrambler, it's just really big, it's really torquey, and a beginner would probably struggle a little bit with that bike. Now, why don't you guys say we chuck this bike a little bit off-road and we'll see what happens. Turning onto our off-road section here, kick some tires around a little bit. That bouncy suspension we experienced on road comes back to bite us so hard when we take it off road. One of the reasons I like, you know, the Himalayan 450 or even like the Ibex 450 is that they are a little over capable of what the bike is actually going to be going down, right? This motorcycle, unfortunately, is about as capable. God damn, I bottomed it out. It's about as capable as this sort of thing can offer. And I'm not the most experienced off-road rider. I do a little bit here and there. I've got the Touareg 660. I used to take my desert sled off-road, but you know, I'm not crazy about it. And yet I find myself thinking like, man, I really don't want to throw anything crazier than this at this bike. And this is a relatively well manicured little washboard fire road thing, right? But man, the bounce back you get from the suspension is brutal. And without having a 21, you know, it just feels like it's getting slammed around. Like, look at this bump right here. Jeez, dude, it just bounces back really aggressively in an unnecessary way. We'll carve a line through here, go down these bigger bumps and whoops and stuff, and like, yeah, it'll holy crap, it'll do it in the way that any other street bike would pretty much do it, you know? I don't find this motorcycle particularly better at doing an off-road thing, wow, than, you know, I don't know, an SV650 or something like that. Like, it's pretty much non-existent, as my 360 camera did not cooperate during that whole segment, but that's okay. And yeah, you guys can tell, like, it'll do off-road in the same way that any other lightweight single-cylinder bike will do off-road. I remember I took a KTM Duke 390 off-road many years ago. This feels almost the same to that, right? Well, let's take it back to the studio and talk a little bit more about it, shall we?
If you ride a motorcycle, a tire inflator isn't optional. It's a non-negotiable piece of kit. Especially now that the weather's changing, tire pressure can swing like crazy overnight. And that means your grip, handling, and safety all go straight out the window if you're not checking regularly. That's where today's video sponsor comes in, the Fantic X8 Apex Portable Inflator. We've worked with Fantic for years now, and we've always had their inflators lying around the shop or on our bikes because they're just really convenient. The X8 Apex we're talking about today is basically the Swiss Army knife of air pumps. It's got incredibly fast air inflation, a big battery, bright LED lights, and it even doubles as a power bank so you can charge your phone while out on the road. It's a little bigger than the X9 Pro we've talked about before, but it's way more powerful and built for riders who need some serious firepower for their inflators. It's actually one of Fantic's best-selling products too, having sold over 100,000 units at Costco in a single year. I actually keep one on my bike and in my truck. The X8 is fast, reliable, and honestly, every rider should have one in their garage or backpack. It's just a really great piece of kit. Right now, during their Black Friday promo, you can grab the Fantic X8 Apex for just $54.99. That's the lowest price ever. Use code YAMMYX8 and the links down below to get 45% off either the standard or deluxe package. And make sure your tires or your ride are always dialed in. Thanks to Fantic for the support. Now let's get back to the show.
Triumph is a heritage brand as much as they are a motorcycle company. Their modern classic line is alive with the echoes of cafe racers, desert scrambles, and rebellious British riders. The Scrambler is a core fixture of Triumph's company architecture. These were bikes that were built on the romantic notion of freedom and exploration, not on a 600-pound ADV spaceship, but on a stripped-back, rugged machine that embodies the less is more philosophy. And now here we are with the Scrambler 400XC, the newest iteration of this mentality. But instead of it being a premium flagship offering, it's an entry-level machine that wears the same badge and evokes the same feeling, but for a new generation at a new price point. At the heart of the Scrambler 400XC is Triumph's TR series liquid-cooled single-cylinder engine. The 398 cc's of displacement are producing just shy of 40 horsepower and 28 foot-pounds of torque. That engine is paired with a 6-speed gearbox and a slipper assist clutch, making it appropriately modern in its underpinnings. A2 compliant as well. It's accessible power. It's exactly what we'd expect from a bike in this segment, but specs alone really don't tell the whole story with this machine. What sets the 400XC apart from the other 400s in Triumph's lineup? Well, compared to the 400X and the Speed 400, the XC moves one step further towards aggressive enduro scrambler styling. You've got side lace spoked wheels, 19-inch at the front and 17-inch at the rear, with tubeless tires ready for less than perfect terrain while not sacrificing the all-important ability to easily plug a puncture in a pinch. Very important. Tubeless spoked wheels is a seriously premium feature that you don't even find on many middleweight adventure bikes, let alone beginner 400s. That's pretty trick stuff. These wheels are laced up to some Metzler Karoo dual sport tires with Barbie brakes for stopping power. Standard fare for the Indian spec Triumphs. To further drive home this adventure-ready nature of this bike, you've got extra protection for both the bike and the rider. The engine comes stock with an aluminum skid plate, a metal headlight guard, raised front fender, and hand guards, although these are a bit plasticky and may not hold up in a big crash. A nice feature Triumph included in this package is switchable traction control and off-road ABS, which is kind of crucial additions for any motorcycle that's positioned itself as off-road capable. You've got the same engine and chassis as Triumph's other 400s, but the character is tweaked. The XC really wants you to play in the dirt, even if it lives, let's say, 90% of its life on pavement. Even little details like the small fly screen and foam handlebar cover elicits the playful nature of this bike. And yeah, it does kind of look like a Huffy BMX guard, but you know, whatever. While this bike hits the nail on the head for a small-scale Triumph modern classic, the Scrambler XC offers a unique character in this segment, which is good because the segment is growing. Small capacity bikes made in India, badged the same as premium brands, are huge moneymakers for global markets. They exist as entry points to these elite brands that are otherwise not accessible for those populations. And the flagship models can be had for the international customers or those well-heeled in the Indian or Southeast Asian markets. Amongst bikes like the KTM 390 Adventure or Enduro models, the 400XC is pretty distinct. It offers retro styling in contrast to the modernist KTM while preserving more polish and panache than smaller heritage models from Royal Enfield. And say what you will, but this badge is pretty important. For some riders, that matters a lot. It's the difference between affordable commuter machine and aspirational machine. The manufacturing story of Triumph's 400s is significant. Although based on British design DNA, the 400 series is built through Triumph's partnership with Indian manufacturer Bajaj Auto. Now, this is key for how premium brands are entering new markets and scaling global volumes. Historically, Triumph was exclusively UK designed and built, but now it's leveraging global manufacturing to offer a premium brand at an accessible price point. Premium doesn't just mean big displacement or high power figures. It can mean heritage, brand cachet, and that special feeling or look back factor, which I do think this bike does have. The democratization of premium brands may sound like an antithetical idea, but it's important for growth in today's motorcycle landscape. So, the Scrambler 400XC certainly looks cool and feels unique compared to some more milquetoast 400cc bikes. But does it really have off-road chops, or is it just grandiose cosplay? A glorified Barbie Jeep for dudes in their 20s, let's say. I think it straddles both worlds, leaning heavily towards style with a hint of capability. The 150 millimeters of suspension travel, while decent, is not at the level of a full-blown adventure bike. The brakes and tires are competent, but the XC badge might promise a little bit more than the hardware delivers. So yeah, you can take it on a fire road or a gravel road, much like you could take just about any bike down a fire road or gravel road, and you can have a lot of fun, but don't expect it to do any hard enduro or crazy stuff. And that's okay, because the styling choices, the upswept exhaust, high fenders, spoked wheels, handguards, all this stuff is just cool, even if the bike doesn't have full adventure credentials. And it's okay to buy something just because you think it looks cool. It's important to explore why it's okay for a bike to look a certain way versus its full capability. Style drives emotion. We see this all the time in the comments where people are saying things about how a bike looks. It informs your decisions, it shapes your perspective and experience. Moral judgments are based on aesthetic criteria, whether you like that or not. You're primed to think of something as good because you like the way that it looks. When you see that timeless Scrambler silhouette, you feel the history, the attitude, and they certainly look way more handsome than a dorky adventure bike. And if you're only going to sometimes, occasionally, every once in a blue moon attempt to go off-road, you might as well get a bike that looks cool. I mean, that's what I did on the Ducati Scrambler Desert Sled, right? And I'm a really cool guy. And that tells you so much you have to know, right? Triumph knows style is what drives many people to the brand. The Scrambler 400XC proves this with enough chops to back it up. It's plenty fun and capable. British vehicles by way of India, or Indian machines by way of British badging, is as much an element of global manufacturing's past as it is a mark of the future. Land Rover, Triumph, or even tikka masala, these are all part of the hybridization of British and Indian cultures. In regard to Triumph specifically, this partnership with Bajaj is not a dilution of Triumph's heritage, in my opinion. It's emblematic of its democratization. By investing in these small displacement machines, they're expanding their reach globally and locally, creating opportunities for many new demographics to get a taste of what this brand is all about. The Triumph 400 Scrambler XC in particular embodies a brand ethos better than any sub $7,000 motorcycle really has any right to. I mean, I look at the details, I see this machine, it evokes that Triumph build quality. So, can it cross the Dakar? Probably not, but it will happily take you across town the long way round. This motorcycle sits in the uncanny valley for me. In case you're unaware, the uncanny valley is a phenomenon where people experience feelings of eeriness or discomfort when like a robot or an artificial figure is almost but not completely human-like. And this effect can happen because those like near human appearances triggers an unsettling response in us, as those tiny little differences can create a feeling that something is just off or wrong. And yeah, this bike kind of fits that to me. The Scrambler 400XC is a full-sized motorcycle compared to the Speed 400, which is sort of like a 3/4 sized bike. Yet the Scrambler is still sort of small when compared to a real Scrambler or an ADV. Now, there's no doubt in my mind this bike is meant for beginner riders. However, unlike the Speed 400, this bike really isn't useful to riders of different skill levels, which dramatically limits its appeal. Let me explain. The Speed 400 has an MSRP of $5,495, and I think it's an honest, simple ride that has a super classic appeal. It looks great and it looks like a Triumph. It's meant to bomb around town, go to a coffee shop, maybe commute if you don't have any highways on that ride and you can enjoy some back roads. A beginner can get that bike and ride it and learn all the fundamentals. Or an experienced rider could pick one up in lieu of a scooter or something less stylish or utilitarian. Both riders with these different skill sets can find utility and joy in riding the Speed 400. But the Scrambler 400XC only works for beginner riders because experienced riders feel this uncanny valley effect of the bike. It's not as compliant or well-mannered as the Speed 400, and it doesn't really deliver on off-road chops beyond what any street motorcycle could possibly conquer. I had the pleasure, or maybe misfortune, depending on how you look at it, of owning a GSX 250R many years ago that we converted into a horrific off-road scrambler. It had knobby tires, a handlebar, and it was of course based on a street model. This Scrambler 400XC feels about 80% as bad as that bike did when it comes to its off-road manners. But a beginner rider's not gonna know the difference. They'll waddle around off-road or on a fire road with their bike, blissfully unaware of how heinous the rebound is on this bike, or how the 19-inch front end has trouble rolling over obstacles, or how the suspension bottoms out when mildly prodded on a larger bump. Hell, I experienced hitting the bump stops on the suspension on just a few nasty potholes around town. And so it leaves me with the conclusion that the Scrambler 400XC is merely a styling exercise, and there's nothing wrong with that. Many bikes are pure styling exercises. Think of bikes with winglets, active aero elements, quad tip exhaust. These are all largely non-functional cosmetic upgrades designed to elicit a feeling from the rider who will primarily use the bike on paved surfaces and never explore what their bike can actually do. The 400XC delivers on that feeling as long as you don't know any better. The good news is that the fueling is improved over the Speed 400. It is dead simple and easy to ride, and for its intended audience, think beginners who want something retro rally styled and can't imagine owning something with the wrong badge like a CF Moto or a Royal Enfield, it's a perfect fit. It's a bit expensive for the experience, but it has tons of look back factor. Now, I'd be remiss to not suggest to this theoretical beginner rider that the Royal Enfield Himalayan 450 exists. It's a motorcycle that has substantially more poise and grace both on and off-road. It's a bike that genuinely competes with larger adventure models, and it looks classically styled. And it's a ton of fun to ride. And best of all, it's actually cheaper than this Triumph. If you're after the badge, then I guess nothing else will do. But if you're in that target audience looking for the best experience for adventure curious and you want something that doesn't look like a spaceship or some crazy dorky looking thing, I think the Himalayan 450 is the answer here. The Scrambler 400XC suffers from being derived from a street bike, dragged into existence as a slightly off-road capable bike, and being a styling exercise. It's pigeonholed itself as a beginner bike, and honestly, that's all it really is. And I'm a big fan of lower displacement motorcycles, but I appreciate them when they're able to offer thrills and fun to riders of many different disciplines or skill sets. Consider a Ninja 400, which can be used as a beginner bike, or a track day tool, or a training tool, or a race bike even, or that aforementioned Himalayan 450. It's a beginner bike, or it's cheap, great ADV fun for a budget rider who wants a challenge. Or how about a CRF 300L? It's a great beginner motorcycle, but it's also an excellent second bike in the stable, or even as a commuter bike for someone who wants a fuel sipper. This bike just doesn't deliver on anything unless you're a beginner rider. So we're gonna rate this bike a 6.5 out of 10 for today's video. It's a great starting point, but a slightly misguided execution. And yeah, maybe it is a Barbie Jeep for men. But what do you think? Would you rate it higher? Would you rate it lower? Did we miss something with this bike? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks a lot for checking out today's video. I really appreciate it. And a big shout out to AF1 in Austin for loaning us this bike for the video. Check them out if you're local and hit the link down below if you're not. We'll catch you in the next one. See you later.